Hello, welcome to another one of our videos, and today we're discussing a topic of a different kind and how exercise relates to mental health. So a lot of the time we're discussing how it relates to physical things, like improving sporting performance, or a lot of rehabilitation for injury, or just simply getting stronger for aesthetic reasons. We discuss that all the time, but obviously the value of exercise to your mental side of it is equally important, if not more so. So there's tons of information about the physical stuff, but really I don't think there's a lot of information explained to the public about what actually goes on, and even in the types of exercise, how it can vary. It's a real sort of an interesting thing here, and like with most things in exercise, there's no black and white. It's just everyone's a bit different. But so we know that exercise helps for people with depression and mental problems, because it does gives you a bit of that endorphin boost and all that sort of stuff that makes you feel good. But there's a lot of inconsistency with the research that's been done. So like I was mentioning before, that what type of exercise is best to do, and how much of it is enough, how much do you need. So firstly, if we just break it down and work out, go back to the beginning and work out where does it, all this sort of begin with, and no doubt it was stress sort of combining to create the problems in our minds, and even the best of us will all struggle with this at one point or another. So the fittest and strongest person can still be broken down by stress. So in some people, the side effects of that are going to be weight gain, joint pain, headaches, migraines, skin problems, on we go. It could be many things. So we just know that the longer it's there and the more damage it's doing, it's going to ruin our health quickly. So and if we leave it unchecked for a long time, it can turn into disease. So that's when it's when we sort of fighting and not really addressing the reasons behind it, it can really turn into a problem. And this is no surprise to anyone to hear this. Some of the reasons behind this, and I'll put a few things on the slide here if you're reading this while I'm talking, but repeated spikes in blood pressure really increase the chances of stroke. So like I said, that's why you can see even a fit or strong person can be still broke down by that. Weight gains are always a side effect of being with the excessive amount of stress, because it really ruins the hormones, and especially cortisol being activated so high and suppressing some of the other ones, and then it affects how things are working in it, the glucose in our blood, and if we don't metabolize glucose well, we get insulin problems, so on and so on. And the longer cortisol is running on a high level, it just weakens our immune system, and that's what exposes our body to the deadly diseases. So cortisol is needed as a hormone to activate the stress response, but if it doesn't shut down, it sort of opens the door for the deadly things. So now on the flip side of that, if we don't have enough stress, so if I'm talking just physical stress, so exercise is a stress. Even if it's good for us, it's a good stress, but if it's used poorly, it's a bad stress. But if we don't do anything, that's also a bad stress. So the couch potato guy here, he's equally going to be as unhealthy as a guy who overtrains. So both of these guys are going to end up in the same place. They're going to be stressed out with, for different reasons. One doing way too much, one doing not enough. All right. So the key is to find what you call your sweet spot. How much is the right amount to activate all the good stuff and not all the bad stuff? If you've ever checked out the Precision Nutrition guys, they have a lot of great infographics, and I like this one. This is just a snippet of one of their ones that they had there, and that talks about that sweet spot where your stress is from, you get stress from doing not enough, and that's the sort of the feelings you may have at the time, and that'd be the stress from doing too much, and then trying to find, how do I get into the normal, normal's not a good word, how do I get into the optimal part where my energy is great and I feel good and I want to do more and everything, I'll make better decisions, and so on and so on. So when it comes to the exercise, you sort of want to use these feelings. These feelings are really a handy way to know if you're doing too much or not enough. So one of the best things about the exercise for our mental side of things is it does boost our confidence. And when you're working out, it gives you a chance to meet other people, and meeting other people can help you create better social connections, and even that on its own, regardless of what type of exercise you're using, just that on its own can really change the way you see the world and how things improve. So if we know exercise is good for us, then why do people pull away from it? Like, it's interesting, isn't it? It's like a strange sort of phenomenon that we know it helps us, but when we're really, really under the pump, that sort of feels like the last thing you want to do, and it's an effort to sort of make that jump into it, I suppose. So it sort of seems to make no sense that we take a break when everything's going wrong. So for some people, it's just they're overwhelmed, and the feeling of doing more exercise just feels like being like more pain on top of more pain. So obviously the thing here is the avoidance of pain. Sometimes that is the best thing to do. Sometimes it is just to take a good break for a minute and give yourself some quiet time. The only thing is, if it stays for too long, and then you start resorting to comfort foods or drinking alcohol, or in extreme cases maybe drugs and other addictions to help ease your pain, that's when it's not a good thing. So there's no easy answer to this, right? So I can't really give you a gold answer to that, because everyone's different in how they perceive things. But a good little book that before I go on, because I'll share you some interesting studies in a second, and that I found in this book many years ago. But I would encourage you to read this book if you're someone that's curious about this topic and exercise with mental side of things. It really gives you good insights into and some different things of how you could use it. But so some of the studies in that book that they looked at, they showed that firstly they looked at it when someone exercises, could they prevent depression? So this is with people who didn't have depression. How did it affect their brain and things like that? So the interesting thing, they had a couple of statements. People may not experience it because they exercise, but it's possible that people don't exercise because they are depressed. So it's sort of quite an interesting question they put up there. But one of the results from their studies was where they examined to see that people with exercise who were active but with no symptoms of depression, and they always like studies that look at a lot of people, and also in different countries, so different genders and everything, but different races of people and that as well, and different cultures. The bigger the cross-section of people, the more reliable the results of the study will be. And this one looked at over a lot of different countries and did exactly what I just said. So what they found was, with 267,000 people, what they found was that exercise reduced the chances someone would experience depression by between 17 and 41%. So that doesn't sound impressive, but that's actually quite comparable to the results they would find from seeing a counsellor. So a lot of things to consider with that, because there's a lot of variables within that they had to take into account. But basically, that's quite an interesting number. So when they completed the 25 studies that surveys a total of 1,500 people, they found 40 to 50% of people with depression responded to exercise. So these are the people who already had the depression. So on the first one back there, that was to see if it would have an impact on preventing it, and this one was to see if it would have an impact on trying to help the person overcome it, I suppose. So 40 to 50% is pretty good. And like I said, these are similar numbers that you would see with medication and counselling. So it's not to say that it's taking the place of this, because maybe in combination with that you would have an even greater chance. All right. So I was surprised to see that the dropout rate was also around about the same number for the medication, which I would have expected it to be greater, because there's obviously a bit of effort and pain involved in taking up exercise, as opposed to popping a pill or trying something with a lot less effort, I suppose you could say. So the dropout rate was about the same, which is interesting. This sort of tells you there's something within the exercise that really alters the way the brain chemistry sort of functions. So the studies also mentioned that all these treatments can and should be used together. So, like I said before, this is not a video to say I want to take the place of other treatments. I think it's just to sort of reiterate the point that it works more effective if it's used in conjunction. So when we mention exercise, which exercise is best? Well, in the book, and they looked at it many times, they found that it was mostly the cardio stuff. So really anything that got you're sweaty and your heart rate up. This really surprised me for a few reasons, because I've always found with the people who I've worked with over 15 years that were really in a bad way, I always found that stuff was the hardest to do with them, because there was a real effort involved and they just didn't seem to have any energy to take part. Even though it was going to be good for them, I've just found it would really sort of bring out the worst in them at times, and they would start to hate exercise. Not with all people, but probably the majority of them. I tended to want to find things that were easier, and over time, once things started to improve, I could sort of gradually increase the intensity. But if I went straight to doing that type of workout, if they knew that was going to be every workout, they just didn't come anymore. So that was interesting for me to see. So this is where you've got to be open-minded to things. So anyway, here's a quote from him. So regular aerobic activity calms the body so much that it can handle more stress than before the serious response involving heart rate and stress hormones kicks in. It raises the trigger point of the physical reaction. So in the brain, the mild stress of the exercise fortifies the infrastructure of our nerve cells, so by activating genes to produce certain proteins that protect the cells against damage and disease. So it also raises our neuron stress threshold. So this is where basically they're saying the better your fitness level, the better your brain functions, and the better your brain functions, the more you're able to handle the things that are going on, so you can make better decisions and not let it affect you as quickly as before. So I've highlighted the main things here: aerobic calming. The key word here, fortifies the infrastructure. This sort of really telling us, sort of building a threshold to withstand damage. So the better it is, the better it functions. Another good quote from the book is the major implication is that exercise not only keeps the brain from rotting, but also reverses the cell deterioration associated with aging. So this is where they actually looked at those values that they were using with depression and mental problems. How would that affect people with disease like problems of mental, being Alzheimer's, and they found that the exercise was a crucial part in that. So that you've got to understand, that's sort of probably comes after all of the other mental things. So summing that up, that really seems that cardio seems to be the best. So like I said, I would have thought the more calming things, Tai Chi, yoga, strength training, because I can make that nowhere near as sweaty, and it can still be very physical, but not to the same degree that the cardio is. So so there's great, and we're going to touch on these in a minute, so to give you a bit of an idea. But so if cardio is best, does it mean just go out and do heaps? Well, not quite, because if you go too far, and this is another great book if you want to read this book about a girl who did go too far, who was in a bad way and really ruined her body even worse than before. So in the early stages she had some great outcomes, felt so good, but kept going, got addicted. That became her addiction, and that is actually what nearly killed her. So there must be a balance between training too much and finding recovery and getting the right amount. So this is where I find the gym junkie and the people who start to really, or people who are really in a bad way, become addicted to that rush, and that's sort of what people call the runner's high. If you're a runner, you know what I mean about that, and I've been there myself many times. So so you've got to be very mindful of overdoing it. So, and one other thing that the book didn't take into account is where we said people to undertake all this cardio stuff to deal with a mental thing, but not appreciating the damage that type of training could cause if their movement capacity is not great to begin with. So this is where they might develop knee injuries, back problems, shoulder problems, ankle, feet. It could go on and on from the overuse of the training, because they just neglected the fact that they weren't capable of doing it very well. So to assume that no injury would result of introducing exercise like that is pretty foolish. I see in my studio every week people injured from this type of training all the time. At no point did they ever learn about how to do it correctly. They just went out and just got it done because they read something somewhere that said if you did so much running per week, you would this, and this. So in the case of this video, you may actually be helping your mental side, but it may come at the cost of your joints and muscles, which will then put you back to where you started, probably worse off because you won't be able to even exercise anymore. So the key is you must understand that the fitness must be earned. You must always apply good fundamentals before you just go out and just start crushing yourself. So the move well, move more principle always applies, even for this mental side of things. So what about the strength training? Like I said before, I was a bit surprised that this wasn't rated more highly. I'd always sort of felt like it was much more beneficial, activated more the anabolic stuff, the hormones that counter the cortisol. So I always found that this was my preferred choice, but you know, now I've sort of probably use a combination of both, just depends on the person. However, you know, in the book they also did conclude that while the evidence supported cardio, they couldn't ignore the positive effects of the strength training for building muscle, protecting joints, improvements of balance and flexibility. So probably the biggest thing that they noted was the effect of the human growth hormone. So they found that the levels of this hormone doubled during a strength workout of, say, squats and deadlifts versus the group who was using running only. So now remember, this is a hormone that counters cortisol. So the higher this hormone is activated, the more the cortisol is suppressed. Remember how we said before, if it doesn't get suppressed, it opens the door to diseases and problems. Well, this is one way that this suppresses that from happening. So you can begin to see how this is a very vital form of training. This is where I probably would prefer to be. Also, anyone over the age of 40, really, this is more important to them than cardio for the physical side of things, because the body's starting to age, and then all these little problems that you got away with earlier on, you don't get away with anymore. So adding muscles massive to the metabolic rate. Again, like I said, it really plays a big role in the hormones. Obviously, at helping bone density and stability, and we could go on and on with many of the other things that it can do. All of these things aren't improved from the cardio side of thing to the same degree. All right, so the older you are, the more important this becomes. So I think really a combination of the two would be preferable. And lastly, the yoga and Tai Chi meditation I could probably include in there as well. I would still say that I haven't really gone into detail on this, and there's no doubting these are great, and for some people this may be the best thing. It may be what they need. So out of the video that I've given you today, I really just wanted to open your mind up to the different side of things, and maybe seeing some of the research and stuff. You know, again, for me, challenges my beliefs on things. So I would definitely be using a combination of all three. I find if you had a combination of all three, and depending on the person of which one I might use more. Some people are not open to this, even though it's good for them. I just think it's junk and they don't want to. Other people only do this, and I think they're missing out on some of that. All right, so you know, finding a balance of the cardio, and really finding the perfect mix, and obviously getting your nutrition right. All of those things could make a huge difference to your mental health side of things, and getting it back to where you want to be with the things in life, and you know, finding how to respect exercise and the perfect balance, and you know, and that could be the missing ingredient for you to get back on track. So if you wanted more information, because I didn't really touch on exercises specifically as such, there's lots of free reports. Go to our website up there, and you know, and there's other books that we have that have heaps of workouts ideas that you can get a copy of. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and you know, it opens your mind up some different ideas, and yeah, and we'll see you on one of our next ones.